Kia ora koutou everyone, and welcome to our second interview in the series of Expanding Our Bubbles, brought to you by Tiny Nation. Kia ora, my name is Erin Maloney. I'm the founding director of Tiny Nation, and we are a home-based early learning organisation, and we're really all about just making sure that we can get our bits and pieces out there to the sector and really collaborate with other like-minded people to share information that's important to all of us as parents, as kaiako, and as community members. So what we're doing tonight is we're interviewing Judy Hunter live. Judy is a child mental health specialist. I'll let her tell you what that means. And basically, she'll be taking us through a little bit more about herself and her background, and she'll also be sharing with us all a bit about the Infant Mental Health Association of Aotearoa, New Zealand, on which she's an executive on the committee. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Judy into the screen. So bear with me as I bring her in, and we'll start kicking things off. Kia ora, Judy.
Kia ora, Erin.
How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. But nerve-wracking joining the live feed and us all getting into what it means to be online and connected in this new normal that we find ourselves in.
It's true. I do quite a lot of public speaking, but I have to say this is very odd, being completely online. First time for me doing a Facebook Live, so thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. We're really excited. Yeah. So in terms of your background, Judy, I mean, here at Tiny Nation, we often talk a lot about our why. We talk about our passion and our purpose and why we're in the early learning sector and what we've set out to do. As a child mental health specialist, and I know that you often talk about having done the mahi in this space for your whole professional career, what's your background and what's your why when it comes to doing the work that you do?
It's a good place to start. So I trained as a child psychotherapist back in the 90s in Wellington, and I don't call myself a child psychotherapist anymore. I did a little bit of that work in a CAM setting or a child adolescent mental health service setting attached to hospitals, and mostly in Wellington. And then I spent a long time in London. And that's where I kind of developed a bit more of a passion for a wider area of child mental health. And I started doing a lot of consultation and a lot of training with what I'd call frontline staff. So the people who are really building the relationships with kids. So people in early childhood centres, people in home visiting services, so like the equivalent of Plunkett. And that is the work that really fires me up. It's working with people who do the work, who do the real grunt work and really build connection with young children and their families. And it's such a big area, it's such a big job. So I really love supporting people in that place and helping them with the why. So the why, because everyone has their area of expertise, and I guess my area is looking at infants and looking at relationships. So I am really lucky to consider that what I do for a job as a passion. And I have, so I'm based in the Hawke's Bay, and I have a little consulting company of my own. It's just me, Childhood Matters NZ, and I do all my work under that umbrella. I do still quite a lot of work in early childhood centres, a little bit of work with teenage mums, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Yeah.
Cool. So when it comes to the term infant or child mental health, can be a bit of a foreign concept for some people. And we went out and we polled our audience just prior to the interview tonight to kind of get a feel for where everyone came from in the sector, or are they parents themselves of preschoolers or in the health and wellbeing space also. And we got a kind of a general mix, a broad mix of everyone. For some who are listening who kind of haven't come across the terminology before, or it feels a bit foreign and a bit of a mouthful, how would you define infant and child mental health?
Okay, so it's something that people people trip over a lot, because I think people hear the words infant and mental and health, and there's almost this kind of knee-jerk reaction, like a denial, like infants don't have mental health. But I think it sort of stems from I think it stems from mental health as a concept anyway. So I thought that was a really good place to start, that So what is mental health? And hopefully lots of people already know this, but if there's anyone who's thinking, oh, what is mental health? It's really about our social, emotional, cognitive or psychological health. So the kind of inner workings of up here. And it's another part of us. We all have it. Some people hear the words mental health and I think they hear mental illness. It's kind of the opposite. It's about how well we're doing mentally. And it's just like our physical health. It's a part of us. So it's really important. So for infant mental health, infants are born with mental health. We have it from birth. We probably have it from before birth. The difference is that infants are really heavily reliant on their early relationships because that is really where everything that we become comes from. We'll talk a little bit more about early relationships as we go through, I'm sure. When we're really young, it's the relationships that we have with the key adults in our life that has a really lasting impact on us. So to talk about infant mental health, you're really talking about family mental health as well, because you're talking about the infant and the relationships that they have. So there's a couple of ways to think about infant mental health. It's really two big areas. One is the emotional health and well-being of young children within their relationships. And we talk about that being antenatally, so even before birth through until the fourth birthday. So even though it's the word infant, it actually covers a lot of that early childhood space. And then the other big part of infant mental health is really the discipline of the knowledge, the theory, the practice, the research that's essential for anyone who's working with infants and young children and their families in a clinical role to know about and to draw on when they're doing that work. So it's both the infant themselves and the work that goes on around that space. And I think early childhood education absolutely has a really big connection with infant mental health because think about the little babies that are building relationships with the people who care for them. And it's why at MHANS we really encourage the early childhood education sector to be involved with us and try and meet some of the needs in the professional development space for ECE.
Yeah. Awesome. And that fascinates me, that whole bridge between early childhood education and just general health and wellbeing and infant and child mental health, because the two are so interchangeable and so necessary to run alongside each other. And it feels like there potentially are some gaps there in the sector, which we'll come to in a moment. But first of all, just to give everyone a bit more of a broader explanation of the Infant Mental Health Association of Aotearoa, New Zealand, on which you're on the executive committee. You're a big driver there. For those of you who don't know, Judy and I met probably around 10 years ago now, and she was fresh here in New Zealand. With her whānau and just kind of cracking into it, but has been a long-standing member now of the Infant Mental Health Association, and a big driver of some of the work that's being done there on a national scale. So do you just want to fill us in a little bit of what the association is here for, who they support, and I guess your role?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a bit of a mouthful, so let's call it MHANS. So MHANS is a charitable trust. We are an affiliate of the World Association of Infant Mental Health, which we'll call WAIM. And we became an affiliate of WAIM in 2006. So we were the 46th affiliate. And now there are 58 affiliates. So this is around the world. In the States, a lot of the states are individual affiliates, but others, like these countries, so the UK and Australia, so there are 58 affiliates of the World Association of Infant Mental Health, and we are one of them. Being a member of the World Association really guides our mission, and it also focuses our what we do, our workforce, our training, and our networking. So we take our guidance from them. There are 7 of us on the National Executive Committee. I'm just going to say we're all volunteers, so we all do this for love, not money. Denise Guy is our president. Lucy Zwinfer is our vice president. They're both based in Wellington. Sarah Haskell's our treasurer on the west coast of the South Island. We've got Mary Ferguson in Queenstown. She's our secretary. Liz McDonald in Christchurch is our membership coordinator. And we've got Marion Doherty in Auckland, who's our general executive member. And me here in the Hawke's Bay. And we're a bit of a powerhouse. I have to do a bit of a shout out for us as a team. We get stuff done. It's pretty amazing. You can become a member of IMHANS for the slight sum of $40 a year. It's individual membership, so each person has to join. It's not for teams. Also, we have a student membership price of $25. I feel like I'm doing a sales pitch now. We have members from a whole range of different sectors. So we have health, social services, early childhood education, NGOs, midwives, nurses, doctors. We have just quite a broad range of people who really have infant mental health as a passion. Our mission statement is to support and promote emotional and social well-being across the lifespan, obviously through an investment in infant and childhood relationships. And we really try to focus on education, training, networking for professionals, but also for parents and caregivers. Some of the other things that we do, we have a conference every sort of 3 years. It's a pretty big conference. We get some big pull with our conferences, some great speakers from both internationally and nationally. We have a website, which is imhans.org.nz. We're on Facebook. You can follow us on there. And we also have a couple of other things that I think we're going to talk about, which is having the FAN model where we offer training, and also the Two Homes document. So I won't go into that. But yeah, for a little team, we do a lot, I think.
Cover some big ground.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've just kind of talked about a couple of initiatives that you're working on as a team, and as some of the only people in New Zealand from a infant child mental health background trained in this space. So when we met, I don't know, probably this time last year, you started filling me in on the facilitated attuned interactions model, or the FAN model, as you would call it. And we had some pretty big light bulb moments in terms of how that model could be integrated more into the early childhood education sector, how it could support teachers and educators in their day-to-day work with children, and also build in, I guess, the aspirations and goals of families, and a more circular model, I suppose, of care and support. Can you just take us through a little bit in terms of the FAN model?
Yep. Absolutely, love to. So I'm one of 3 FAN trainers in New Zealand, New Zealand and Australia. Denise, Guy, Lucy Zwimfer and I, all on the exec, are the 3 FAN trainers for New Zealand and Australia. So like you see, the FAN stands for Facilitating Attuned Interactions. So another acronym. It was developed by a woman called Linda Gilkison in Chicago at the Erickson Institute, and originally for working on with fussy babies. So a helpline where parents would ring in and they'd be having problems with fussy babies. And this was a model designed to help the people at the end of the helpline, the workers, to be able to attune in relationships. So it's really about attunement. And the reason that's so important is that, as lots of you will know who are listening, unless we're in tune, unless we're in sync in a helping relationship, it's really hard to be helpful. In order to be attuned, we need to be calm ourselves, but we also need to meet people where they are. So the FAN model is really all about helping us to stay calm and helping us to tune in to where we need to be in that relationship. So it's a tool for building relationships, and it's also a tool for reflective practice. And both of those things are really important in the early childhood education space, I think. It's we're rolling it out in New Zealand. It's slightly different from a lot of other trainings because it's for teams. So it's not for individuals. You come along with your supervisor. And the other part that's different is that once you've done the 2 initial days of training, there's a reflective practice period of 5 or 6 months where you unpack the model in the real world with real families, and then you have supervision, and the person who's supervising you has supervision with us as the trainers. And then we come back together at a day 3 training to really, it's a real consolidation period. So it's not like you get the tool and then off you go. It's you get the tool and you get to deepen it and develop it. And from that perspective, I just find it incredibly useful. It looks like a simple model. There's a diagram that comes with it, but it's got incredible depth. And at IMHANS, we heard about it at a conference quite a few years ago. and fell in love with it and kind of thought we've got to get this to New Zealand. So it's been a bit of a journey, but we're really excited. We've got a page on our website if anyone's interested in finding out more. We're one of just 2 international sites, so it's in a lot of America and about 19 of the States, and in Israel and now New Zealand. So we're pretty stoked to be a part of that journey and part of the fan family internationally.
Yeah. So if people out there in the early childhood education sector want to know more or want to touch base with you directly, they can do that by going to the MHANS website?
They can, yep. So we've got a dedicated page and we've got a place where people can register their interest. We have trainings at least once or twice a year, and we're also developing a model when we can go to workplaces and train in-house, as well as people coming to us. We might get to this a little bit later on, but a really important part of the FAN is the ability to mindfully self-regulate. And like I said, it's really important that when you're in a helping relationship, or not even, so I'm thinking about early childhood education, when you're in a relationship with a baby, in order to be most helpful in that relationship, you need to be present. And that's not always easy. I'm thinking particularly at the moment, it's not necessarily easy. We're living in a pretty wonky world. So mindful self-regulation is an excellent tool to be able to bring us back to the here and the now, and to be able to be calm and to be able to be attuned. So we've developed a little webinar around that just to help people at this time of COVID-19 to be able to be calm so that they can offer relationship, whether it's with a child or an adult. And that'll be coming onto the website tomorrow. People want to look at that. It's free. It's about 35 minutes. We just get you to register, and people can also find out a little bit more about the FAN through doing that.
Brilliant. So you've got this free webinar available to anyone working in the sector and the space with children and families, which sounds amazing, all focused on self-regulation and how to be in attuned relationships, particularly right now when everything around us is so chaotic and crazy, which is a big ask for a lot of our teachers out there, especially now that we are heading into the next phase, or likely to be heading into the next phase as of next week. We are looking forward to an announcement on Monday that may indicate that we might be moving to level 2 and everything that might bring with it. And obviously for all early learning services and primary services and all schooling services in general, there are a lot of considerations that go along with that. MHANS has been pretty proactive in developing a whole range of resources and bits and pieces to support parents, caregivers, teachers, anyone in the health and wellbeing space through COVID-19. Is there anything else you want to share in relation to that in terms of what else is out there?
Yep, so we've got a whole range of resources on our website that we update every couple of weeks. So if you just go to imhans.org.nz, you can click through to that page from our homepage. So that's got, excuse me, a range of things for parents, or for children, for parents, for professionals, also for women who are pregnant at the moment. And we're also doing a lot of posting on Facebook every day. Part of it's trying to help people to kind of cope mentally with what is an incredibly tough time. So we're trying to post, kind of inspiration and little daily reminders that, this too will pass. And also information that's relevant for both parents and professionals in the early childhood space.
Yeah. Cool. So as parents ourselves, or as a parent of young boys myself, stuck in the middle of level 3 and at home all day, still in isolation largely, trying to do our best, working from home, schooling from home, mumming from home, wifing from home, feeling like you're trying to be all things to all people and maybe not doing any of it any real justice. What would your advice to parents be right now in the midst of level 3 and everything that COVID has brought with it?
Oh, take it easy. We taught Linda Gilkerson, the FAN founder, the colloquial phrase "she'll be right." So I think that's a really good one for now, because I think there's a lot rides on this. I think I've been doing quite a lot of reading about pandemics and what that means for us. And as humans, because we haven't been in a pandemic before, we don't have a place to come back to in our brains that tells us what to do. So normally that's what we do in a new situation. We have a little part of our brain that says, oh, actually, what you need to do now is da 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 da. And because it's a pandemic, never faced this before, we don't have that. So a lot of us are kind of cycling through fight, flight, freeze, fight, flight, freeze. So it's the survival part of our brain that's really activated, and it's really discombobulating. I certainly know for myself that, I mean, my productivity levels are about 0.5. It's exhausting just getting out of bed. And if I get out of bed and I put on some activewear and I walk the dog and I cook some meals and I that maybe do some washing, that's probably a pretty big day for me. So I think lowering expectations is really, really important. I think one of the mantras that I've lived by since I heard it a few weeks ago is that this is a pandemic, not a productivity contest, because I've seen the posts about what people are doing and the sourdough bread and the banana bread that's being baked, and that's great. If that's your thing, absolutely go for it, but don't feel like you have to, be keeping up with the Joneses with the sourdough and the banana bread. What children are going to remember from this time is how they felt. It's going to be the feeling of the house. It's going to be the mood of the house. So if there's lots of fights and battles over clean rooms and schoolwork, or the long list of things that need to be done every day, that's the memory that they're going to have. So I think just kind of easing off a little bit. What kids really need is emotionally available adults, people who listen to them, people who look at them. They need stability, so they need things to be relatively predictable. They need help to kind of understand what's going on. It doesn't need to be complex. It doesn't need to be deep. And actually on our website, we have some great little resources that we've borrowed from other people. So picture book ideas or online picture book ideas where it explains kind of what's happened in the world, because it's pretty bizarre that we've gone home, shut the door and not left for 6 weeks. It's not like we do that often at all. I think the other thing that's really important for all of us is that there's no such thing as a perfect parent. Honestly, this information saved my life when I had a toddler. It's about being good enough, and good enough means that you get it right about 30% of the time. And I work with teenage mums, so I always have to qualify that. It's not that you try 30% of the times. You're probably trying your guts out a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. It's that the in syncness, the in tune part of a relationship, the really good part, the bit where you look at your child and you just feel all glowy and they look at you and they feel the same. That's only about 30% of the time. In fact, any relationship, and this is based on research. So the rest of the time, there's 70% of the time that's pretty mucky. It's pretty messy. You're trying to get back into sync. Maybe there's been a rupture and you're trying to repair it and it doesn't quite work, so you're trying again. But that is the reality of relationships. And I think it really did save me to know that I didn't have to get it right all the time. If I got it wrong, I needed to try and make it right. But actually, the really beautiful in sickness is only about 30% of the time in any relationship. What else? I think self-care and self-compassion. So I'm really trying to walk this one myself. So as parents, we really need to take care of ourselves. I'm in a really privileged position. I've got one child and he's 11. So he can do a lot of stuff himself. I don't have little kids. But even if you have little kids, making sure that you put your own oxygen mask on first so that you can respond to your kids is really important. And if you need to reach out for help, then absolutely do that, because we need to be calm in order to bring calm for our kids. And I guess, when we have really little babies, they really pick up on things. They pick up on the emotional feeling of they know whether we're tense or not. And so just working to keep calm, working to lower those expectations. I came into this thinking my house was going to be spotless and the garage was finally going to be cleaned out. And if anything, it's gone the other way.
I came into this thinking it doesn't matter anymore because no one's going to be visiting me.
Perfect. It's the perfect scenario. But really making sure that you're you don't have to do this all the time by any means, but just kind of tuning into your kids, just checking in with them, and just making sure that you're seeing them for who they are. I think it's really easy as a parent to kind of get a little bit sidetracked and be thinking about shaping your kids and molding them and tuning them into the perfect kid that you want. But actually, every child comes into the world with their own uniqueness, and really being able to tune into that's really important. And this is a great time. We're stuck with them 24/7, so we can do lots of observing, lots of noticing.
Great. I'm just reading some of the comments that are popping up, Judy, and I'll put you on the spot here just a little bit. Lots of feedback on, yes, putting on your own oxygen mask first, and obviously the 30-70% being so true. But Waikato has said need emotionally available adults to be there during those times of distress from a child's perspective. And
Yeah.
Caroline's just backed that up with be calm to bring calm, which is a really nice sentiment and a nice way of saying that. Is there anything else you would add to that in terms of some ideas or tips for parents who are feeling that overwhelm or that dysregulation, and how to kind of help bring back that equilibrium?
Yeah, so I guess a very simple way to bring us back to calm is to make sure that we're getting enough oxygen. So this is one of the things that we talk about in the webinar on mindful self-regulation, that we always start with the breath in order to come back to calm, partly because it's something that we all do all the time, but also when we get into a fight, flight, freeze situation, when our survival brain takes over, what we need to calm down and get the rational part of our brain back online is oxygen. It sounds super easy, but you'll all know when you've got a little bit activated and someone says, well, you just need to take some breaths, that's actually not what you feel like doing in that moment. So it is a practice. It is something that you need to come back to again and again and again. I recommend teaching it to your kids. So I do mindfulness work with kids. And when you teach your kids about deep belly breathing and how it calms things down, helps to close your lid down when you flipped your lid, they remind you when you start to get a bit activated. They're good like that. So the breath is about just coming back to a place where you can just slow things down. So it can be as simple as just staying still for a minute or 3 seconds, and doing 3 deep breaths in and 3 deep breaths out, just as slow as you can. If you've got more time, there are tons and tons of tools. We've got some of these on the website as well. So Smiling Mind is an app that you can access that offers you chances to develop a bit more of a longer breathing practice. Even just a change of scene, just stepping outside or going to boil the kettle, and as you boil the kettle, just taking some of those deep breaths. Anything that just acts as a little bit of a circuit breaker, because most of us will know that we give ourselves a little bit of a buffer between something that's happened and our reaction. If we can have a little pause in the middle, often our reaction is going to be a little bit different because we've allowed ourselves that chance to come back to calm. So the breath is an excellent tool for that. I know it sounds easy. I know it's not. The more that we can practice, the easier it becomes. And also, I guess when that doesn't happen, it's important to talk about that as well, because all of us will be stuffing it up. All of us will be, having the times when we talk to our kids in a way that we don't want to. Yes, we need to be emotionally available. That's the aim. Sometimes we will get it wrong, and this is what we call rupture and repair. And it's so important at those times that we take a moment, we come back to calm, and then we make the repair with our kids. It's not the absence of a rupture that's important. It's the presence of a repair. So no such thing as a perfect parent. When we get it wrong, make the repair. There's lots of research behind this to suggest that this is how children develop empathy and resilience. So they know that relationships don't get broken just because mum lost the plot a little bit. I mean, obviously it depends on the lost the plotness and how often it's happening. But we're talking about, a mum who gets a bit grumpy because, something got messy or someone asked them something when they were cooking dinner. Make the repair. I talk about having a repair loop with your kids. So it's something that you get used to. It's something that you can bring out at those times. It obviously still needs to be genuine. But for me, what it looked like with my boy when he was little was that I would get down on my knees and he'd come in and give me a hug. And we still do that. We still make up. and then you kind of reset your kids' stress level, so that kids' stress levels go up when there's a rupture, and then you get to reset them, and you get to have the connection back in the relationship, which is what all of our kids need. So if you can, do the breathing. If you can't, make it better.
Yeah, and I know you taught me about the making it better and the rupture and repair, and I have drawn on that a lot over the last 7 weeks for sure. In terms of moving and transitioning and expanding our bubbles, so this series of interviews that we're doing at the moment, the focus is expanding our bubbles and this whole nature of, going into lockdown. And a lot of people said, the easy thing is to go into lockdown. The hard thing is how do you come out of it? Because, you're programmed in a completely different way by this stage and in isolation, and it does things to you. So I guess for a lot of us, we're now considering what that new world looks like. From a parent's point of view, as we are supporting the transition of children back to early childhood centres and homes and carers, and from a teacher or educator point of view, as we're welcoming those children back. One thing I really wanted to ask you about tonight, Judy, because you've got such a wealth of knowledge in this space, is about that transition and how to make that transition smooth, or how to support it to be as smooth as it can be, particularly at times of chaos, and how we support families and teachers and educators to manage that.
Yes, gosh, such a big question, really. I feel a little bit like I have got Stockholm syndrome, which is when you are a hostage and you start to identify or feel sympathy towards the person who's holding you hostage. I feel like I've been locked up too long.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be really big for everyone, and I do think we need to be really gentle with ourselves as we think about the next step. I think there are going to be some really, really anxious people, possibly me included, about what it means to get back out there and the risk around that. I think for going back to something that you've been to before, so kids going back to early childhood centres or in-home care, I think it's really individual. So I'm never going to answer a question that gives you A plus B equals C. It's always individual. So I think what's really important is think about the individual child and the individual situation. There is no one size fits all for this. I think be really thoughtful and sensitive about the child's experience of transitions and of ECE prior to lockdown. Also what their experience of lockdown will have been, because that will be different for everyone. Think about their temperament. So there's different children have different ways of being in the world. There's some kids who will be incredibly gung-ho. They'll race back into their previous ECE experience and you won't notice a difference. But then there are kids who maybe are a little bit more shy or a little bit more difficult in terms of temperament, and they'll find that much harder. Thinking about attachment history, thinking about really what's gone on during that time. So lots of reflection is kind of the first place to start. So thinking, does the child have a key worker who's invested in them that can make that connection and help them come back? Can you slow the transition down? We don't need to bolt back to where we were before. I think it's going to be really tempting for parents, particularly working parents, to go, yay, I've got my, my 9 to 5 pack, off you go to kindy or wherever you were. But slow it down. This has been huge for everyone, and we really need to recognise that this is unprecedented. This is not a 4-week holiday in Fiji. This is something that's really changed us, and kids will have felt that. Kids will have picked that up. So take it really slowly. Don't charge back into what you did before unless you absolutely have to. Just slow it down. Can you use a transitional object, something that reminds the child of their main attachment person, whether it's mum or dad? Can you scaffold the experience with the use of stories? So I'm a big one for stories, whether they're verbal or written, about what's going on for kids. So kids need us to make sense of what's happening in their world. And one of the ways that we can do that is through storytelling. Be available to the range of emotions. It's maybe not going to be pretty and happy all the time, and just knowing that, and knowing that you need to be available for that. You can't say, well, I don't like that emotion, so you can't show it. So then you miss the attunement if you do that. Being calm yourself, practicing your breathing, and supporting parents, because parents may have a lot of anxiety around these transitions too. So that's huge. I mean, that's not an easy job to do. So again, being gentle with ourselves and being kind, and just chunking it down, just doing what you need to do on that day. Trying not to jump too far into the distance with everything else that needs to come.
Cool. Just provoking a lot of comments in the stream. I can see Caroline's talking about, as an educator, welcoming back a few children this week and really taking it slow and bridging that gap nicely. So that's great to hear that's perfectly aligned. Tracy's asking, how much notice would you give a sensitive child that they are going back, in terms of, I guess, preparing the child for that transition, now that we know that it's, I don't know, somewhat imminent, that things are changing and we are going back to those previous care arrangements and forging ahead into the new normal. What does that look like in terms of the child and the conversation with that child?
It's really going to depend on the kid, and it's going to depend on their experience of ECE before we lock down. I think I encourage people to go with their guts. Trust your gut. What does your gut say about what is right for this kid? Most of us will have had experiences with our kids when they were little, when we tried something and it really didn't work, so that we know to do it differently next time. Also remember that if it doesn't quite go to plan, that's a rupture, and you get the opportunity to repair that. So it's not as easy as saying, oh, you should tell them 3.5 days before they go back. I wish it was. I really do. I'm a bit of a fan for talking quite far out about things, because I think it helps to moderate the experience for kids, and it helps in terms of preparedness. I know not everyone feels like that. I know people who think that, you do it the night before and then there's kind of
in the car.
Yeah. But I think go with your gut. As parents, you know your child the best, and as educators, if you've had a relationship with a child, you've got to know them as well. I'm aware that I've kind of made this assumption that everyone's had these connections ongoing, through this time in their bubble. So I've got a boy who's seen his teacher every day, but actually in the early childhood space, that might not have been happening. So that might be the place to start, that you start with a virtual connection over a Zoom or a telephone call, and then you bridge into the next step. Yeah.
Cool. One thing that we haven't touched on yet that kind of fell under some of the work that you're doing as a part of the wider IMHANS group, which probably plays into this as well, is this idea of two homes, and of children who are living with both parents in separate homes in some instances, and everything that brings to the equation when it comes not only to transitions like this, but just to life in general and to supporting that child. So IMHANS has, as a part of the Michigan Association for Mental Health, adapted some resources around that two homes. And when I read that on the website, I found that quite fascinating, because it sounds like a great resource for early childhood services to be using if they are supporting a child that comes from two homes.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I just happen to have one here. That's convenient. I went and dug out my copy. You can get this on the website too. So yeah, this was adapted from a Michigan Infant Mental Health Association document called Supporting Relationships for Infants and Toddlers with Two Homes. So really designed when parents are living apart, but equally could apply for a child who's with a caregiver, and then has visiting time with parents. It's great. It's got a wealth of information, and it's a really good resource for anyone who works with young children, because there's a lot of children who are living in two homes in New Zealand. It has some information about what babies and toddlers need at different stages. I'm just turning to where I can show you that. In their development, and sorry, not very good with the camera. It talks about what counts most as relationship, So really honing in on what we know is best for kids. It has at different age groups what children need, and then it talks a little bit about different situations. So thinking about children at different ages and how you might manage contact and relationship building with parents. So for little infants, it might not be that they spend equal amount of time at the two houses, but for older children, that might be something that you're working towards. It really depends on the circumstances, and it really depends on relationships that the child has with the people in their lives. There's information about there's a parenting plan template, so you can use that to make a plan if children are living in two homes. There's information about the legal system, about family dispute resolution process. There's some online suggestions for resources for parents and practitioners. But it really does try and look at it from an age and stage point of view, because obviously what is relevant for a very little baby is going to be a little bit different for what's useful for an older child. But at every stage, it looks at sort of ideal situations, working together. It gives little case scenarios of parents and what's happened for them. So really great resource. You can buy a digital copy on our website, or you can get a paper copy, and it's a good one to have. Next to you, if you're talking with parents who have a separated or divorced and have a baby or a child.
Cool. Yeah. We've just had a comment from Waikato using the principles of the circle of security would likely help with making that transition as well. Maybe she's been a part of your work before, Judy, because I know the circle of security is something that you're deeply passionate about as well, and it probably plays into the next question. And I guess one of the biggest things that you advocate for is the relationship, right? The relationship between a child and that dyad, that relationship between them and their key attachment figure or person, mum or dad or caregiver, educator, teacher, whoever that might be, and how obviously we have primary attachments, so within our family and our whānau and our community, and then we have secondary attachments that extend further than that into the care places and other places that we go. So one of the big things, obviously with the relationship being the answer and needing to hone in on that, one of the questions that's come through quite a lot, particularly for teachers working in larger group-based care models, is how do you support that dyad to really establish, how do you support that attachment relationship between a teacher or an educator and a child, and I guess what does it look like when you get it right?
Yeah. It's tricky. The circle of security is an excellent model for anyone who's wanting to know a little bit more about attachment relationships, attachment theory, and what children need. It's a little bit like the fan model in the sense that it's a picture. So it looks pretty simple, but there's a lot of depth to it. And really what it talks about is how all children need a pair of hands that holds their relationship, that they can launch off from and go off to explore, because that's how we learn about the world. But also that they need to have a place where they can come back in and dock once they've gone off and done the exploration, and they need somewhere to come back to. And obviously this is a very short circle of security discussion, but what we really want is a child to be able to travel smoothly around the circle. So we want them to be able to go off to explore, and we want them to be able to come back in and dock. They will only so that's an attachment relationship, and they'll only have a handful of those in their lives that are significant. So maybe 3. So mum, dad, grandma, or maybe 4 or 5. So mum, dad, grandma, and a nanny who spends a lot of time with them. So it'll be someone who spends a significant amount of time with them when they're really little. That'll be a secondary attachment relationship after maybe mum and dad. And that's really important because when we talk about attachment, we can talk about attachment security. So that's kind of the gold standard. That's the good enough model where a child feels like their needs can be met and has experience of that. But there's also insecure attachment relationships, and if a child has insecurity with parents but security with a caregiver, then the research is really clear that that is a good thing for them to have that experience of a secure relationship with someone. So ideally, yes, with parents, but if the relationship with parents isn't super secure, then actually having another supportive relationship is really, really important. So when you work with kids in early childhood, you really want to be working in a primary caregiving model way, so that children have one person to go to, that they know that person, that the parent can feel a little bit jealous of that relationship is actually the gold standard, believe it or not. I know parents don't want their kid to love someone else sometimes, but actually you really want your kid to love the person that they're with, and you want that person to love your kid. Because at that time, what they're doing is they're standing in for you as the hands of the circle, and you want them to be able to move smoothly out from that relationship and come back in and get what they need from that relationship until you come along, and then you absolutely want to be, top dog.
The person.
Yeah, it's a hierarchy thing.
I remember having that feeling returning to work as a mum, and I had a nanny with my boys, and I remember that moment, that day where I felt that just insane level of jealousy. And I think your voice, Judy, was echoing in my head at that point where I was like, this is really good because it means they're really connected and they're really attached. And so I tried to really, overcome that. But it's incredible when you see it in play and in action, and the security and that as a parent you feel when you can see that your child has that relationship with someone else.
Yeah. It's probably bittersweet, I imagine, to have that. I think when you're working in a setting where there are lots of kids and not enough adults, it's very hard to have that as an experience. And that means that the kids are really missing out, because what they need is stability, and they need security, and they need a go-to person. They don't need a go-to person in the morning who then is a different person in the afternoon, who then is a different person when that person's gone off to change someone else's nappy. They need a go-to person that helps them to feel safe and settled and secure, because otherwise what they're doing is they're hanging out on the top half of the circle, and they've got nowhere to go. And we don't want that. We want them to be able to come back and dock in. It's really important for us as humans that we have that relationship-based offering. It's the same for all of us. It's the same for adults. If something happened in my life, I would need to dock in to my safe place. And it's so for kids, it's a huge ask not to have that. So I think there needs to be a lot of thinking in New Zealand and around the world about how we care for kids, because it's not, these are children's lives, and we haven't talked about this a lot, but the science of early relationships is that it has a lifelong impact on not just emotional health but physical health, how you are cared for in the early years. So how your attachment relationships form and how your brain develops. It's significant. And there's a saying, the early years last forever. It's a little bit like building a house. You want a really sturdy foundation. You want a really, really good start, the best you can get. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you want it to be solid, because that's what keeps us resilient as humans. And it's not that if there are issues in early childhood that it's too late. It's never too late. But really what you want is a really good, secure, solid start. And if a parent is working or doing what they need to do, then you want someone else to be there to, offering that for your kid.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of it in a nutshell, right? It's all of the intangible stuff. It's all of that, you talk a lot about the feeling, and it's the feeling. And it's so hard to, I guess, really be able to put words to it sometimes, but knowing that you have got that relationship, or that your children have got that relationship, is a linchpin in being able to go on and live into your full potential. And you see all of this research around the first 1,000 days and the importance of those relationships, and of the children having the anchor and knowing that, I can go on, I can be resilient. I know that problems have an answer. I can be a leader. I can, I can communicate. I can I can be a part of a team, all of those kinds of things, all of those emotional intelligence skills that we rate so highly, they start with those very early relationships. And there's one quote that we really like at Tiny Nation, which is, no significant learning can occur without a significant relationship.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the key, right? That primary caregiving model. And I see Mike Bedford's tuned in again tonight from last week. Kia ora, Mike. And he's just written totally the ECE context relationship may be their stable, secure place. So making sure that that children feel that in their place of care, because that might be the only place that they're getting it sometimes.
Absolutely. It can be hugely significant. Kids can look back at those times and they can remember that the feeling that they had in that relationship that they didn't get anywhere else. It's really, really important.
Great. Well, we're now at 8:20, so we better kind of start rounding things up. Unless anyone's got any further burning questions, I just want to say massive thanks to you, Judy, for joining us. Your knowledge and your experience in this space is huge, and it's I guess something that we're really passionate about here at Tiny Nation, being a part of early learning, building that bridge between early childhood education and mental health and wellbeing, and making sure that we're taking the best of both worlds, because it's all needed in our journeys as parents and educators in Kaiko. So thank you very much for being a part of our live series. There you go, your first Facebook Live, done and dusted.
Thanks for having me. You gave me an excuse to get out of my activewear. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And next week, stay tuned, everyone. Next week, we're bringing you Amanda Fleming, who Judy's actually done a bit of work with before, as well as myself, who specialises in emotional intelligence, taking a leadership framework and applying it so that we can really realise our superpowers as educators, teachers, and Kaiko in the early learning settings. So we'll share a little bit more about that in the lead up to next week. So stay tuned on the Tiny Nation page. We hope to do a little bit more talking with Judy again in the not too distant future. So kia ora, Judy, and thank you so much.
Kia ora, Evan. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, team. See you next week.